that we're going to have the largest deportation in the history of our country, and we're going to start with Springfield.
Welcome back to America Decides. If re-elected, former President Trump has pledged to deport millions of people living without documentation, therefore unlawfully in the United States. Yesterday, he went a step further, vowing to revoke temporary protected status for Haitian immigrants living and working legally in Springfield, Ohio. So just think about that, adding those who are here legally to a large number of those here without documentation for potential deportation. A new report says the cost of any mass deportation effort, if enacted, could be catastrophic. That's the word the report uses to our country. According to the American Immigration Council, removing all of the 13.3 million immigrants without legal status in the United States in a one-time operation, if achievable, would cost the federal government at least $315 billion. Mass deportations of this kind could also lead to a loss of as much as 6.8% of the United States' annual gross domestic product, or more than $1 trillion. Adriel Orozco joins us now. He is a senior policy counsel at the American Immigration Council. It's great to have you with us, Adriel. Explain to our audience how you arrived at these numbers, and if these numbers are, from your estimations, on the upward side or the more conservative side.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. And I think it's really important to first highlight the reason why we put out this report. We've been hearing a lot of proposals around mass deportation, but we haven't heard many details. And so what we wanted to do is really think about, what would this actually look like? What would this actually cost? And what would be its impact for everyday Americans? And so in our report, we have two figures, like you mentioned. So there's an economic impact. And as you mentioned, it could be up to 6.8% of GDP that would shrink. And for context, it's important to note that this is similar. It's 4.2 to 6.8%, which in 2007 and 2009, during the Great Recession, the impact on the economy was 4.3% of GDP shrinking. So this would be possibly higher, on the higher end of our estimate, a bigger impact than the Great Recession. But if we think about the cost, the $315 billion that you mentioned is a one-time, very conservative estimate. And the reason I say it's conservative is because, when we're looking at the one-time costs, we can't really take into account, the real cost of ramping up the massive expansion of our immigration enforcement, immigration court, immigration detention system in order to be able to remove what we calculated around 13 million undocumented or removable immigrants. And so in our report, we actually include another estimate, which is something also that we've heard as a policy proposal, in removing 1 million undocumented immigrants per year. And in that cost, where we can actually use comparators to estimate what it would look like to increase detention, to increase courtrooms, to increase ICE personnel, we find that it's actually nearly $1 trillion spread across a little bit over 10 years, or $88 billion per year. So it would be massive to think about the amount of investment the federal government would have to do to actually put something like this into fruition.
And Adriel, looking at the report, it's worth, I think, reminding to our audience that in modern American history, we've never, if I read the report correctly, deported more than 500,000 people per year, and those deportations were principally at the border, not in the interior of the country. Therefore, it would be much harder to get to 1 million, let alone 13 million. I also read in the report that in order to carry out a deportation initiative of this size, you would need, of course, facilities to hold those deportees as they are moving to their home countries, if in fact that's where they go. And the report said 24 times the current deportation capacity would have to be built just to do that. Do I have those figures correct?
Yes, that's correct. So when we think about the current detention capacity, which is around 35 to 40,000 individuals that can be detained on a daily basis, you would have to increase that dramatically in order to be able to detain at least 1 million people for removal. Something that we weren't able to look into as concretely is thinking about things like, who would be the individuals that could be easily identified that ICE actually has check-ins with. However, that would be a small fraction of the individuals that, like you mentioned, ICE would have to go into communities and try to find them. And what we did with our costs is we used the estimates for our particular subagency within ICE that actually accounts for the costs of having to go into the community, to have to try to identify individuals who have not had contact with the criminal justice system, so as to be able to have a more accurate idea of what this would truly cost.
And I read also in the report that if we were to add up everyone incarcerated in our country currently, state, local, and federal, that's about 1.9 million people. So when we think about these numbers, 1 million a year in deportations, or maybe 13 million all in one time, we are talking about vastly more numbers than we currently, through all of our systems, state, local, and federal, use to incarcerate those now.
Yes, that's right. So it'd be about a 50% increase. And when you think about it in the context that we live in right now, the United States is one of the most carceral states, countries in the world. And to think about, in the criminal context, that figure, but really trying to expand into the immigration context so broadly, I think that would be really quite tremendous. And so I think it's really important for folks to know. And one thing that we really try to highlight here in this report is that, sometimes people think, oh, mass deportation is really going to only impact the immigrant community. And one thing that we really, really want to highlight here is that this would fundamentally transform all of American society. Imagine seeing ICE officers going into communities across the country. Imagine seeing 24 times the amount of detention centers or space across the country. Like, that would be visible within people's eye view, because there is no way that you can deport such a large population without impacting every single one of us.
Adriel Orozco of the American Immigration Council, we appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you.